Well, thank you all so much for coming. We're really excited to have this panel, which brings back some of our alumni to talk about their research experiences. And am I doing the introduction, or is someone else kicking us off?
You'll be doing the introduction.
Okay, that's what I make. Yeah, just want to make sure yeah. All right. So thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you all. And so first, I just wanted to introduce our wonderful panelists. Dulcinea Groff, do you want to kind of kick us off and tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are now, and your time here at University of Maine?
Yeah, so I am Dulcinea Groff. I got my PhD at the University of Maine, studying under Dr. Jacqueline Gill. And I finished up in 2018 and immediately started a postdoc at Lehigh University, where I worked on mosses on the Antarctic Peninsula. And from there, after that 2-year postdoc, I landed my current position at the University of Wyoming. And here I'm studying microbes in wetlands in the Rocky Mountains. And I'm looking at what microbes can tell us about past climate, about past environmental change, which is a common theme throughout all of my research. Looking into the past to tell us something about the future. And I guess I could start off talking about some of my experiences at the University of Maine that helped me get where I am today. I was part of...
I was going to say, can you hold on that thought? And then I think we'll do our introductions first, and then we'll continue to that question. So really, you're on the right track for sure.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Dulcinea, or Dr. Groff, I should say. So Evan Chase is our next panelist. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are, your current role, and what you did here at UMaine?
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Evan Chase. I graduated from University of Maine in 2011 with a bachelor's in physics, Bachelor of Science in Physics. And then I immediately did a master's degree at the University of Maine in Master of Science in Teaching under Dr. Michael Whitman in the physics department. And that led me to, as part of that master's degree, do some student teaching, do some research in that role. And I've been a STEM teacher at the middle school at the Kennebunks for this is year 7 or 8 now. But that's really what I've been doing since leaving in 2013, and it's where I'm probably going to be for a little while now.
Great. Thank you so much. And our third panelist is Robert Lindyberg. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are now and how you connect to UMaine?
Well, thank you very much. I'm currently the CEO of Global Secure Shipping, and we're a spin-out business from the University of Maine with some composite technology focused on secure shipping containers. My kind of journey through UMaine, I came to Maine about 30 years ago, fresh out of college from upstate New York, and took a job designing bridges for the Maine Department of Transportation, and got to know University of Maine, came up in 1994 for 1 year for a master's degree, and ended up becoming one of the original students and then staff members at the Advanced Structures and Composites Center. And I stayed there for about 17 years. In 2011, I was an assistant director at the center, and left to join the private sector down in the Research Triangle. Was a part of a couple different companies that we grew and sold. And then in 2018, 2019, got really the desire to come back to Maine, in part because my son was going to become a student at UMaine, and this position was available, and this company was just getting started, so I was very excited to come back in 2019 and take over the reins of the company here and grow it.
Very cool. Well, thank you all for introducing us or yourselves. It sounds like you have a really wide variety of pathways that you've ended up kind of out of your UMaine experience. So thinking about the time that you spent here at UMaine in terms of preparing you for the careers that you're on now, could each of you talk a little bit about your experiences at UMaine in research, and how did that shape your career? Do you feel like it prepared you for career readiness? Did it help you make connections and networking? Dulcinea, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So during my time at UMaine, I was part of an interdisciplinary program, or traineeship. And through that program, I was exposed to like different classes, such as like economics, natural resource management, things that were very much like disconnected from the work, the paleo work that I was doing in the Falkland Islands. But I felt like all of like exposure to all of those different disciplines really prepared me for working on like large teams right now, which are multidisciplinary. And even within that program, I developed proposals with like social scientists, and that was really, really challenging. But it's taken me down paths I wouldn't have probably taken had I wouldn't be as confident approaching things like that had I not had those experiences. And also, there were plenty of opportunities for me to write proposals to fund not only my research, but to go to like conferences. And through those opportunities, I went to conferences, and that's how I landed like my job, one of my jobs. I also attended like research seminars where, even though I didn't think that they were like related to my work necessarily, I had some, I learned a lot from those, and it had some of my best ideas from attending seminars that didn't seem related to my work. And I also had an internship working with an NGO during my time there. And it was very different from my work again, but it led me to working with NGOs today in other research. And I'm able to apply my paleo work to like modern NGO issues. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Evan, what about you? How did your research experiences here at UMaine prepare you for the pathway that you're on now?
So it's certainly a bit rockier of a road. So when I was in my undergrad, doing my undergrad in physics, I got towards the end of that, and I started to really feel like I wasn't on the path that I necessarily wanted to be on. Like my career prospects of the path I was on were not things that I was coming to realize were not things I necessarily wanted to do. And so how could I transition that into something more meaningful? And so I spent my last year of my undergrad in doing my senior project with looking at students and like looking at how students gesture when they talk about physics, like how they use their hands, and how they can tell some really, they can tell things completely different with their hands than what they're actually saying. And what do we take out of that, and can we make valuable sense of that? How does it match up with their speech? All these things. And so I decided that was really where a lot of my interest lied, and I wanted to do more with that and work more with students. So I did the master's in teaching, and I basically continued that work, took that work and looked more at some physics problems that are really well understood and that we have a lot of research on. And just did a whole lot of interviews, surveys, seeing how students, both beginners and experts, talk about physics, how they express themselves, what happens when what they say doesn't match what they show, and how we can make sense of that. And did my student teaching as a result of like in a physics classroom, using that work to help me do that. And then all of that work with students really helped me to kind of, I found the job that I'm in now doing STEM work, which is not directly physics, but it's obviously still very related to the work I was doing. So what I'm doing right now is, what my classes look like. I'm at a middle school, so I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But was basically given not necessarily carte blanche to do anything I wanted, but certainly it was a new program. And so I got to mold it in certain ways that I wanted to mold it. And so like my sixth graders will do, some beginning coding with JavaScript. My seventh graders will do some like tabletop game design and robotics. And my eighth graders will do 3D design with Tinkercad and some Python programming. And these are things that I learned how to do like in a more, auxiliary capacity during my undergrad and in my graduate work, but it just all kind of came together with the research and the coursework that I was doing while I was at UMaine.
That's great. Sounds like you were able to make a lot of connections that, the skills and sort of methods that you were learning, if not the content itself, is really transferable to lots of other sort of careers. So I think that's a really great point. Robert, what about you? How did your research experience here at UMaine prepare you for the pathways that you've followed since you graduated?
It's really been a substantial building blocks. When I came to UMaine in 1994, I was already an experienced bridge engineer, but I had very little research experience, and only a bachelor's. And I had not done any sort of research as part of that bachelor's. The first thing I got from the University of Maine in my master's and my PhD was really how the training and the mentoring to really perform fundamentally sound applied research. And I worked mostly on the applied to engineering and commercialization side. I stayed out of the basic research, but nonetheless, the skills and the ability to put together and execute fundamentally sound research projects were really the initial critical building blocks. Then after I got my doctorate and stayed at the University of Maine as a staff member at the Advanced Composite Center, really got to work with businesses that were going to take and commercialize that research, and developed both business skills and understanding how to learn and write business plans, as well as go after funding proposals, and ultimately worked with good mentors, and then eventually led research proposals with successful ones with National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, and the Corps of Engineers and others. And that was, it really it started just with the basic building blocks about how to be a good researcher, how to write small research proposals, small $5,000 or $10,000 research proposals with the Maine Technology Institute, and then how to grow into larger, applied research and business proposals. When I left the university in 2011, I took over a division of a growing company, an engineering company in Raleigh, North Carolina, and was able to put those skills to use working with the Corps of Engineers to commercialize non-destructive technology for the nation's major dams, and really put that into action with dams, a couple hundred dams across major dams across the United States for the Corps of Engineers, and it really melded all of those skills together. Frankly, I'm doing that now. This is as a spin-off company. Our company now is the culmination of about almost 20 years of research with the University of Maine and Georgia Tech. And now we're commercializing it. So we're having to continue to do a lot of the applied research and design. And I'm working with good partners at UMaine to lead and coordinate that, but then also to really manage and execute future proposals for our clients, as well as develop new products and make the company ultimately very successful.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to open it up to our audience attendees. Just as a quick reminder, this is being recorded. If you could use the Q&A feature on the bottom panel to ask a question, we'd love to have your questions for our panelists. Really anything that you think would be helpful to learn from, this suite of experienced UMaine alumni from across different career pathways and across career stages. And so while you have a moment to sort of think about the questions that you might have to ask for our, it can be for individual panelists or for everyone, I can kick us off. I actually have a question for you. which is, for someone who might be just starting out, who might not have a lot of research experience. We often hear that you need experience to get experience, right? And so what advice might you have for someone who's trying to really break into to research to see if it's, maybe they want to know if it's for them, or they want to set themselves up for success in the next step of their career, but maybe they just feel intimidated or they don't know where to start. What advice might you have for someone sort of at the beginning of their career stage? Anybody who wants to go first, feel free to. Yeah, Robert.
Well, one of the great things about the University of Maine is there's a lot of opportunity for folks both within the sciences or aspiring to the sciences, or within humanities and wanting to participate in research. The research centers there's a wide variety of them, and the ability to accommodate and the mission to accommodate students and students' needs in those centers really, my experience goes down working with major universities and like NC State, like Tulane, and others, and I found that University of Maine is second to none in this area. So, if a student has an interest in research and pursuing research, go and visit the research centers, talk to the faculty members that participate in those research centers. If you're enthusiastic and willing to give it a try, there will be multitude of opportunities, and you'll get a great exposure and be working with great people.
I would just add that I think it's important you can just like cold email people, whether it's faculty or graduate students, and you don't have to know exactly what you want to do. One of the best ways to figure out what you like or where your interests are is by just trying things out, and you might figure out you don't like that. And I totally agree with everything that Robert just said. Kind of have to put yourself out there and seek those out. But there is a level of privilege that might come with or that's inherent in maybe like, you want to take on a volunteer position. So that's something to keep in mind, that you could volunteer, but more often than not, there are funds to support undergraduate research.
That's a great point. That's something, especially if you're an undergraduate, you can get paid to do, right? And if you have a work study position, you can work in dining, or maybe you can work in someone's lab. That's a really great point. Evan, did you have some thoughts to add?
Yeah. So just a couple pieces, playing off of those, thinking back to how I found some of my, finer interests. And a lot of those came out of just like the individual research projects I was doing for my courses in undergrad. Like those were things like, write a paper on this topic, and digging into that topic was like, oh, I really want to know more about this now. And when it got time to do my senior research project, and I had a couple different professors saying, hey, you seemed really interested in my research. Would you like to do that with me? Which, made it easy. That isn't something that probably every professor says to every student, of course. But I knew those professors from my upper level courses. And they knew me, so they knew what I would be interested in. The other piece I wanted to throw in there is that the other kind of half of my research that I didn't mentioned before was that my master's degree was through the RISE Center at UMaine, so the Research Institute in STEM Education, working with the Maine Physical Sciences Partnership, and working with middle school teachers around central Maine, like working to coherently go through and work with them on this science curriculum. And there were so many different opportunities under the umbrella of the Maine PSP, the Maine Physical Sciences Partnership, of things you could do. I think I did probably 10 or 12 different, had 10 or 12 different roles over 3 summers. And then throughout the years, the 2 years that I was doing my master's degree, anywhere from just like data entry to qualitative analysis, to interviewing teachers and in some cases students, just like across the board, a ton of different things, all under that one umbrella where I knew I wanted to be. I just didn't necessarily know where in that world I wanted to be.
A really great point, and made me think of another question for each of you, which is, so Evan, you mentioned things like data entry. I think a lot of people, especially those who have been maybe locked into one pathway and then realize, maybe like Dulcinea said, they tried it and they don't like it, but that's what they thought they always wanted to do. Then don't necessarily realize just how transferable some of those skills might be. Could any of you talk about skills that you picked up in your research experience at UMaine, or maybe even down the line, that you ended up using in an unexpected way, or that turned out to be really useful and more transferable than you might have thought when you first picked up that skill? Go for it, Robert.
Well, I think as really being involved in engineering and research, my research topics were more technical, and but nonetheless, as we moved along, it became very critical to make good engineering presentations, and then good outreach presentations, and good graphics. And while I'm certainly not an expert at it, the ability to put together a good graphic presentations, good, more artistic content is something that, frankly, I didn't expect that I would be doing much of at all. I had to in some places, and it's really been a benefit to be able to translate the research and technical content in a meaningful way for folks outside of my discipline. Which ultimately that's what we're here to do. It's not just to explain engineering to engineers. We need to explain engineering and education and other technical subjects and engage with the wider world of them. So that was a really positive. I did not expect to gain those skills as much as I did, and that was very positive.
That's a great point. Dulcinea or Evan, do you have anything that you learned during your time that you ended up using in surprising ways? I know, Dulcinea, you said you had a couple of internship or IGERT related experiences while you were here that felt like they were outside of your field, but maybe turned out to be useful in the end.
Yeah, I think some of those things I learned turned out to be useful for sort of interpersonal social interactions with people in other countries who know nothing about what I do. Especially when I'm trying, and it's kind of what Robert was saying, like being able to talk to different groups of people about your work or how it's relevant, why they should care. Definitely learned a lot about that. And I feel like I can navigate those situations with a lot of confidence now, no matter what field or discipline or, non-academic role someone's in.
That's such a great point, and I'd love to follow up on that. That it's not just the technical skills; it's the interpersonal skills. But I also wanted to give Evan, if you had any thoughts about that question.
Yeah, and I mean, not too much, but what I was thinking more about was not even necessarily how something transferred from UMaine into my current job, but also just into other things that I do, like combining like my the work that I did at UMaine and my current job. Like, I'm also a martial arts instructor. And so like I started training the martial art that I teach now. I started training that when I was an undergraduate through a university club, actually. And once I got to a level where I was teaching that art, like 6 or 7 years down the line, and started to think about my teaching, it allowed me to take a lot of the ways that I, thought about my teaching, and a lot of the metacognition that I learned about how to do when I was a graduate student, and the same sorts of things that I had applied to my current job, and taking those and applying them to just another aspect of my character, just applying them to a whole other form of teaching and seeing it in basically the same way. And that's helped a lot, just taking all those same things and applying it to a completely different thing.
That's really interesting too, that You know, I've heard from some students, for example, talk about how their experiences, their interpersonal experiences, you know, working as a server while they were in college or something like that, or some of the hobbies that they were involved in actually turned out to have really strong benefits in unexpected ways. Yeah, and I just want to, you know, remind our attendees, if you do have a question, do please feel free to jump in, or just a statement, or you want to share your own experiences, you can just use the Q&A function and I'll be monitoring that. And in the meantime, I wanted to kind of follow up on that, inspired a bit by something that Dulcinea said about the social aspects of research. Sometimes, you know, research is, you know, something that we do on our own, but increasingly it's done in a collaborative world, especially whether you're working with clients or stakeholders to kind of co-create questions of interest, or you're a part of large interdisciplinary teams. You know, you might be supervising people, you might be having to collaborate sort of with people laterally or across disciplines. Did you have any experiences, or would you recommend, you know, seeking out experiences that you felt prepared you for the sort of I guess interpersonal or mentoring or supervisory or collaborative, sort of the more human side of research, not just the technical skills that we've been talking about, but the human face of research?
I mean, I can certainly start that one.
Go for it. Thanks.
Because I remember a lot of, just from the interpersonal piece. Like I remember early on, like when I started doing the research that I was doing, working with students, working with teachers, and interviewing students, and when I started doing that research, and you start to dig into methodology and where to start and how to design and all these things, it's really easy early on, or it was really easy for me early on, to forget that these are people, and forget that the research that I'm collecting is personal, and that the research that I'm collecting, like the answers that students would give or teachers would give to questions, like they're just like everyone else. They don't want to look like they don't want to show that they're wrong, like even though they're students, right? So just this whole experience of realizing and learning that, you know, as we should understand that the thoughts that they're giving us, and anytime you're working with people, is like, that's personal information regardless of the type of information that it is. So learning to use that and respect it when reporting out on it or interacting in those interviews, like that was obviously that bridged really well into what I'm doing now. But just taking, like, learning how to do that research with and truly do it with the respect that it deserved, was a really good experience. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Robert or Dulcinea, do you have any thoughts about the human side of research, the collaborative or client-facing side?
I mean, one of my last research projects at the University of Maine in 2010 and 2011 was really being a part and running a part of the offshore energy kind of research, and that was really multidisciplinary, collaborative, involved a number of great faculty throughout the university, and one of the actually spending the time to go attend some of their events and their outreach, I learned a great deal. I learned a lot about the bird migrations on the coast of Maine and how important they were. And actually even now cruising the coast of Maine, it's really as I do in the summer, it's really opened up a wider world. And learned a lot about climate change, and learned a lot about other aspects, other research topics, both social research topics and scientific research topics, and collaborating and meeting with those faculty both in and out of the University of Maine made it opened up a much wider world, and gave it a great deal of perspective, and really showed the valuable resource that UMaine is.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the seminar thing again. And my advisor pushed me to attend seminars even when they weren't relevant to my work. And again, like I said before, I had some of my best ideas attending other people's seminars that were not related to my work. But another thing that I did was there's usually an opportunity to meet with whatever seminar guest speaker is on campus, or however it's done now through Zoom. And that's like kind of scary to like meet with someone, especially if you think they're like really important in your field. But if you practice doing that, you'll get better at talking to people, and you don't need to know anything about their research necessarily. There's this human component. I've sat and talked with guest speakers about like women in science, about, you know, not even about their research or even my research. And you make these connections with people, and you know, our science world is small. You never know when you might meet them again down the future, but practicing doing that, I think is important. And I could see myself getting better at it. And it takes the scary out of it.
Can I add one small thing to that? Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Because it made me think too about like my minor when I was an undergrad, because I did a lot of work. I did a minor in anthropology, because before I started doing my physics, I thought I wanted to do, you know, something with that and archaeology. But I started like being in those classes in like 300 and 400 level like anthropology classes at the same time that I'm doing 300 and 400 level physics classes. Like those are two completely different worlds. But then suddenly I'm like reading papers about like nuclear decay and how obviously that is wildly appropriate in, you know, carbon dating and all these other tests. And so like bridging those two worlds and digging into a world that I didn't think was going to be my focus definitely helped to allow me to talk to some of those other people in a meaningful way, not just in the words that I understood, but also using their words and their language.
That's great. We do have a great question in the chat, so I'll read that. That's from Sarah Holbrook. What is the best way to deal with failure? And how does your response change depending on how personal it is versus someone on your team was depending on you or the result?
Failure is simply, it's a great opportunity to learn. I think everybody has probably gotten a rejected paper, a rejected research proposal, or just a heavily marked up thesis from your advisor and your committee. I myself, my PhD defense was about an 8-hour PhD defense, and pretty tough, and it was ultimately successful. But those were the things that I learned the most from. I'd be lying to say that every time I went through one of those that I was not disappointed. I was, and in some cases, very disappointed. Yet, when setting back and understanding what needed to be done to succeed, and what I learned from that, ultimately you put those to use, put those lessons to use. And that's what makes you successful in the future. You're not going to be successful without failures.
Such a really great point. I always tell my students, you can't, you can't get if you're getting rejected, it means you're applying, you're putting yourself out there, right? And you can't win the grant or you can't get the job if you don't apply. So yeah, Dulcinea or Evan, I know Dulcinea probably has some thoughts about marked up drafts. Yeah, do either of you want to talk about failure?
Yeah, I clearly remember the first small proposal that I wrote was rejected when I got to UMaine, and it was devastating. I was like, oh man, I am no good at this. How am I going to get money to do whatever? And I spent a lot of energy feeling bad, I guess personally feeling bad for myself. And then just something clicked one day, and I thought, what if I just funnel this sad energy into finding the next thing? And so, and I'm a lot better at it now, but I take the time to be upset about it. And then I just find that next thing, because I guess I kind of like writing proposals. I like trying to like pitch my work to different audiences. But it was a learning experience to like how to transform my energy into it being like useful. And I also think it's important to separate my work from like my personal, like how I view myself. And that's hard to do. And that's something that I'm still practicing today.
That's a really good point, that, you know, we are more than our work, you know, and a rejection of our ideas as part of the scientific process. As, you know, Robert said, it's a pathway to success, but it doesn't mean that it's a rejection of us as individuals. Evan, it looks like you have some thoughts about rejection.
Yeah, and it's across a couple different perspectives. So, I mean, in the work that I'm doing now, and really all the work that I've done in undergraduate and graduate school, is the first question I tend to invariably ask myself is, was this something, like, was it my fault? Like, was this something that I could have prevented and chose not to, or didn't see clearly enough to prevent? And obviously, is it just a regular learning experience? Like, this is the first time I tried it. And, you know, like, there's obviously certain types of failure, and there's certain, like, depending on the reason you're failing, like, are you learning something new, or is it something that someone expected of you to do anyway, and they're expecting your experience to, you know, override the risk of failure? But I know that, you know, once I tend to stick with, you know, is it my fault? Like, is this something that I could have prevented versus, and then start to think about, okay, who does this matter to? Like, who does this failure affect? And in what capacities? And so, to some extent, depending on the size of the project and depending on like who's affected, there is a certain level of damage control that goes into that. And it's like, okay, how do I clean this up to the best way that I can? Like, who do I need to ask for help in this situation? But that's just the other thing, is like, who can I ask for help? Like, I'm one person, and maybe the task should have been doable by me. Maybe maybe I should have known how to do a test better. Maybe I should have spent more time, but also, like, it's possible to, you know, I think we all know this, it's possible to commit no mistakes and still fail, right? It's possible to do everything correct that you know how to do and still get it wrong. And that's a really, like, talking to a lot of people, that's a really hard lesson for people to recognize. Like, I can know exactly how to do my craft and how to do it well, and when I use this method and when I use that method, but sometimes nothing works. And that's just more experience.
If I can add to that as well, I think, you know, so something that anybody who is applying for or writing a grant proposal, no matter how large or small, or applying for an assistantship, or applying, you know, working on a degree and submitting to their advisory committee or submitting a paper, each one of those institutions really wants to see you succeed. All of that, I've sat on committees, I've sat on grant evaluation committees, on business review, and when there are multiple respondents, everybody is excited, because it's showing the interest, and it's showing that there are a lot of good people out there to address this issue. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you can only pick one winner, one or two, but nonetheless, I've never been on a committee, I've never made an application, I've never been on an advisory board where all the members weren't engaged in wanting the people who applied to win and to succeed. So in these competitions, the people that are really judging you, they're far more welcoming than probably we have created in our own minds, and far more engaging, and can learn a lot from them.
So sort of shifting gears here, and again, I'm happy to take questions using either the chat function, which I can see, or the Q&A if our attendees, again, if you want to share your stories or if you have any questions for our panelists. I would love to hear a little bit more about, you know, one thing I often hear from folks when it comes to sort of research is, how do you find ideas? How do you stay fresh? And some of you are working in more applied sort of research applications or in education. Some of you are doing basic research. How do you keep up to date with the science, and how do you what are the ways in which you sort of stay inspired and have ideas for questions to pursue? Do you have any advice for folks about that?
Sure. My own experience is that living as broad a life as possible in terms of interests is often important, and being open to different cultures, different art, different ideas. Really one of probably the greatest pitfalls for those of us in technical research is we really like what we do, but if I focus on nothing but my own technical research specialty all the time, it becomes very, very narrow. I'm most creative and come up with new ideas. Oftentimes when I'm not doing anything related to my technical subjects, when I'm discussing education with my wife, who's a teacher. When I'm visiting an art museum, when I'm taking a walk in the woods, when I'm and relaxed and open to that. I think balancing a good technical focused career with keeping really both sides of your brain moving and engaged and interacting with folks is very critical in coming up with new ideas.
I can jump in then.
Go ahead.
I think two perspectives here. The first shorter one is I often find myself thinking, like, whether I'm in my classroom teaching or whether I'm like training in my martial art and teaching that class, like I often find myself like asking this question, like, I wonder how could I use this idea in that other class? Like, I wonder, like, when I'm teaching, can I apply like this teaching method to my class? Like, can I apply whatever like thing I'm teaching in that class is like some sort of brain break in my classroom, or regardless. But like the other thing too is like just in terms of keeping up with like my own ideas, I do spend a little bit of time digging into journals. And as a teacher, like I tend to use, my local library to do that because they have access to everything. But like I tend to, keep up with that reading, when I have the opportunity, being part of like some of these smaller groups that I know are pretty unique to teaching, like just like book groups and smaller, educational cohorts certainly gives me ideas about how other people are thinking through the same ideas I am. And of course, if you have a teaching partner, that makes that life a little bit easier. I don't currently, but also just looking at, for me personally, the job that I have has kind of, excuse me, I'm sorry. You can tell I'm in a school because the intercom just came on and there was an announcement. So you can tell that. No, but the other stuff that I've had to kind of figure out is, what to teach, like what's valuable, what's most important. And that led me to a lot of like, what will be valuable 21st century skills? What will be things that I think will be important? And then going out and talking to people and actually asking, okay, what is important to you? Like, if someone comes to you for a job, what do you want them to be able to do tomorrow? Right? Or like, what do you want them to be able, what's a project you're working on right now that you'll need something from someone 4 or 5 years down the line? What will your needs be then? And just working with other teachers like at higher levels in my area and in my district, being like, what will you want your students in 4 years to be able to do? And how can I help you do that? So I look at it from a few different directions.
I really liked the point that Robert made about like having some like freedom in your brain to be able to be creative, like to have that mind space. So that's also another privilege to not have, you're not stressed out about something else or bothered with something else. I think that's really important. And like you were saying, you could have a walk in the woods, like to help clear your mind. I know that whenever if my job is demanding that I come up with some new idea, I need to start thinking about that well in advance. For me personally, I need time to come up with creative, fresh ideas. Another way that I come up with ideas is by talking. When I was a PhD student, was like talking with the undergraduate students that were working with me. They would ask like what were simple questions, but if I couldn't answer it, or that would like show like, okay, I don't really understand this. And so I could like go to the literature or just like start talking about it with other people. So really just sort of talking about like harebrained or half-baked ideas with people for me has been really useful for me.
So kind of building on that as we kind of get close to wrapping up, some of you have talked about some of the opportunities that you pursued while you were here at UMaine that weren't directly related to your research, whether that's attending a seminar series or a club. Do you have any recommendations for, what do you think are some of the centers or resources that may not necessarily be on someone's radar if they're here being trained in research, but you thought were especially valuable to you, whether that's a service or a program or a certificate or something that would be a resource here at UMaine that you found really helpful for you to engage with that supported your research careers?
Well, I can say it was really after I completed my degrees, but while I was still working at UMaine, the Innovation Center was found to become very prevalent, and I had the great opportunity to work with the founder, Doug Hall, who was a UMaine graduate himself, and what was really great about that center is that it really doesn't matter your background or where you come from, and that the innovation process that they teach really welcomes and draws on multiple backgrounds. And if you want to look at new research opportunities at business, and really be learn how to be a part of a team, but learn how to innovate. That's a pretty exciting way to do it, and it was really coming into its own when I left, and I actually took some of the skills that I learned there and brought them into business, and it's been very successful. But that's one maybe students don't really know, and I would certainly highly recommend.
Great. Yeah, Dulcinea or Evan, were there any particular clubs, communities, services, resources on campus that you just found that were really helpful that you would recommend to others to support their research or their growth or development?
Yeah, so the graduate student government was a huge resource for me. It was a pot of money every semester that I could apply to that could get me to a conference or push my research forward a little bit. So I thought that was one of the most valuable things that I could count on. And there were also lots and lots of resources because I was in the ecology and environmental sciences program. That program offered undergraduate students like opportunities to talk with graduate students about, and that's in like an informal way. And that was always really cool because they wanted to know, like, did you just go straight to graduate school? Like, and they weren't afraid. It was sort of like a safe space to talk about those kind of things. And yeah, and I think the Climate Change Institute has, if you're interested in climate and any other discipline, there are usually like opportunities to check out the Born Symposium, which is like a conference sort of that where everyone's showcasing their work, and that would be a great place to like get exposure to some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, and I think I don't necessarily have a specific piece of where of that sort of thing, but I do know that just while I was there, I found obviously the graduate student government was really good for, just like you were saying, getting grants and funding that way. I found the Career Center pretty useful for me personally. And obviously not necessarily from like a research perspective, but obviously from how to take my experiences and put them in a package that made sense to someone else that knew nothing about what I was doing. But I think the broader piece of advice I would have there is like, just talk to your professors, talk to your advisors. They have the resources. They've done it. Like they know how to do it. All of the stuff I learned in graduate school, like all these procedural things, applying for grants, writing the proposals, all of those things I did. Actually, I did that a couple times as part of a larger process of just going to a conference. Like something the first time I did that, there were like 12 of us going down to Philadelphia for this conference. And I'd never done any of that before. And I had no idea how to do any of that. And so my advisor's like, okay, you need this, this, and this. One of the PhD students says, I would also recommend you do this. And then, everyone was just chiming in for all the people that hadn't done that. Like, what mistakes did they make? So it's honestly just talk to people who've done it in your department, what you're trying to do, who are also trying to do the same thing. You'll probably find a lot of answers for really specific questions that you didn't even know you had.
Thank you for those really great recommendations. So to wrap us up, I'd love to hear from you just any final thoughts or advice that you might have for our researchers in training about, just advice, maybe something I didn't think to ask you or we didn't get to talk about, last kind of parting thoughts about, things that you did here, in your time at UMaine that help support your career, or just general thoughts or advice for folks that would kind of help them as they're, especially in this, the end of this, really tumultuous last year. I think everyone could use a boost. So we'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
I don't have any magic thoughts. It's been a tough year for everybody. And, I will say my appreciation in particular of educators through this process it was already very high and it's increased exponentially. I think both the UMaine and educators in large part have done a great job under challenging circumstances. As we transition back, hopefully in the near term, a relatively normal or more normal existence. Just really re-engaging on all levels as much as possible, and enjoy the community. We're about to go back into a community that experience that I think we're all missing very much, and we haven't seen for a better part of a year. And go out and enjoy it and be a part of it. And I think success will happen. Research success will happen. Personal success will happen.
Right. Thank you for those final thoughts, Robert. Evan or Dulcinea, did you have any kind of parting words of wisdom or encouragement for our researchers, our early career researchers?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll add is kind of going back to what we said at the very beginning of this. It's like, I don't remember who said it, but find time outside of your career and find time outside of your research interests to do something entirely unrelated. Like, even if it's for 5 minutes, like it doesn't have to be a thing. Like, you don't have to go learn a martial art for 10 years, right? Like, you don't have to be these things. They can be like, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to I'm doing 8 hours of work today. I'm going to go for 5 minutes and go for a walk around the building, or I'm going to go outside and fly a kite for half an hour. Why? Because why not? And like those people, like just especially in this year, like there's always more research. There's always more work. Like, it'll always be there. Yes, there are deadlines. Yes, there are needs, but like that work will always be there. And you can't do it without a healthy mind to do it. So take the break, get the coffee, drink the water, right? Like, take those breaks, like, and find yourself within that bigger role.
I would add that put yourself out there. Like I was saying, like cold email people. You never know. Don't take it personally when someone doesn't write you back. Just keep trying. seek out those opportunities and definitely rest your brain, as Evan was saying.
I think those are all really wonderful parting words. So I just want to thank each of you panelists for your time today, for joining us. I know out of your incredibly busy schedules, especially, busier than usual now, and just for sharing your experiences, as UMaine alumni and where your research pathways have taken you. I know, I speak on behalf of our attendees that I think this was really valuable. So just, our applause will have to be silent or emoji style, but I know that you've definitely inspired a lot of folks today. So thank you for your time. So thanks all for attending. There will be a second session later this week. And just thank you for joining us today. And hope you enjoy the rest of Maine Impact Week. Oh,
thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, someone just asked about receiving the recording link. Melinda, I'm not sure if you want to answer that question. It'll be up later, so hopefully we'll hear soon. Great, well, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your days.
Thank you.